Well, we've had the budget and the pollies are now back on recess. God, they get a lot of holidays. Winston Peters, in fact, off in Nepal, I understand, today. And the rest of them out around the country, glad handling, taking pictures of themselves in silly hats and visiting factories and putting them on Facebook and telling you that you should vote for them next time. But there has been a little bit of politics toing and froing. We've had an interest rate drop and we've had some media attacks on what politicians wear to kind of take stock, as we did with Robert Patman on International Affairs. Our good mate Chris Trotter joins us by phone. Chris, lovely to talk to you again. How are you?
I'm pretty well, thanks, Sean.
All right. Look, firstly, I want to ask you, do you think that what the Finance Minister wears when she delivers the budget on Budget Day is a legitimate news story?
Yeah, I suppose it is. Because that's how people think. And it's particularly the case for women, I suppose, because women and their clothes are almost impossible to separate. When we had Dame Jacinda Ardern,
I want to just stop you here, Chris.
She wasn't
I want to stop you here.
But, you know,
could you please make sure you don't dig yourself a hole with every woman in your life that you're never going to get out of?
Oh, look, the women in my life are very, very clothes conscious, Sean.
But we'd never I can never remember a story back in the day. Bill Birch was wearing a Hallenstein, double-breasted Hallenstein suit.
No, because men have what is essentially an unchanging uniform. They have the standard business suit. Well, yeah, let's not go there, Sean.
Okay.
They have the standard business suit. About the only thing they can change in terms of how they look when they are presenting a budget, in this case, is the colour and the patterning of their tie, and that is certainly commented on.
Yeah, ties have been commented on, I'll give you that.
Yep, by the news media. But, it doesn't matter whether you're Hillary Clinton or Jill Biden or Jacinda Ardern or...
And Helen Clark used to get... She wore trousers to Downing Street, remember that?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember that.
Well, there was a story. She wore trousers to meet the Queen or something, Helen Clark. And that was front page news.
Well, yeah, so it just kind of makes the point, I think. Whether or not in the best of all possible worlds what somebody wears would count, that's an argument you could have. But in this world, it does, and it has, and I guess, women just bear this burden, although I suspect there are a number of women, even in the world of politics, who will very gladly wear something from a top designer, whether they be a New Zealand designer or someone from overseas, because they know that it's going to get commented on, and they know that they are going to be judged in this way, no matter how unjust that may be in the greater scheme of things. It happens. A lot of things happen.
And, of course, we forget the real fashion icons of New Zealand political history, like Mrs. Longy. You remember she wore a home-knitted pink cardi once with plastic sandals?
Well, there you are.
See?
Now you see, she just dressed like an ordinary Kiwi woman, and they commented on that. Nicola Willis got a designer dress from London, and they commented on that.
Okay, you've made your point, actually. Yep. All right, was it also an indication, though, Chris, that was one of the more boring budgets ever delivered in New Zealand modern history?
Well, I didn't find it boring necessarily. As with most budgets these days, a lot of it is signalled beforehand. I was very interested, however, to see just how much money cancelling the pay equity process in train, shall we say.
Projected expenditure was taken off the books. Yeah.
Well, yes. The allowance made was given some quantum by the 13 odd billion dollars that the government found that it now had. And that was an extremely large figure. That's why I was very, very keen to see just how large. Because I think once all the sound and the fury passes, it's going to be clear that the way the pay equity legislation was written and the way it was going to be paid for was already and would have become even more unaffordable with every passing year.
And we got to remember that pay equity, this really puts it back to when it was first introduced, how it looked. Labor had amended the criteria for taking a pay equity case, which had resulted in the increase in possible liability for the Crown in settlement.
Well, that's right. But if you dig down deeper into that whole issue, you find all sorts of things. For example, and this really should be cleared up definitively by people who are trained at this sort of thing. But it seems to me that the 2020 legislation made provision for the state to pay for pay equity adjustments, even in the private sector.
Yeah.
So think about that for a minute. I mean, remember when John Key said that he thought that working for families was socialism by stealth? Well, I think that was probably a bit of a stretch. In the case of working for families, but mate, I mean, as an old socialist, the pay equity legislation was coming pretty damn close, you know.
Whatever the case, look, I don't think the budget provided a circuit breaker for any of the major camps in politics. I don't think it necessarily moved the dial and public opinion anywhere, Chris. It wasn't the mother of all budgets, but it wasn't the granddaughter either.
No. And I think that $13 billion prevented it from being the mother of all budgets. Let me reposition slightly there. I don't think Nicola Willis is Ruth Richardson.
No.
I don't think Nicola Willis is driven by ideology to anything like the same extent as Ruth Richardson. Yes, she's a conservative. She's a member of the National Party. But I don't think, savagely taking to state expenditure, with a screaming chainsaw a la the president of Argentina is really in her repertoire. But honestly, without that $13 billion, she was in a very tight spot.
I hear what you're saying. Have you got time for us to take a break now? Because there are two other things I want to get. Okay, well, let's take a commercial break. The big one is everyone's saying, oh, he's never done this before. Winston's come out and said, now what has he said, Chris? Because I'm always very careful about what Winston said because he can say so many things with the same words. Is it that he won't do a coalition with Labor or he won't do a coalition with Chris Hipkins?
The latter. He has a deep personal animosity towards Chris Hipkins, quite clearly. I think that must hark back to the 3 years during which New Zealand First and Labour were in coalition.
Listen together. Yeah.
Yes, it's true. They were.
Yeah.
It seems a long time ago now, but yes, they were for 3 years. But that was an increasingly fractious political relationship. And at that time, Chris Hipkins really was one of the principal enforcers of the Labour Party. Always been a very tough guy in that regard. And clearly something happened between Labour and New Zealand First, between Chris Hipkins and Winston Peters, and Winston has neither forgotten it nor forgiven it.
Okay, is it an invitation from Winston then, or is it an opportunity for him? Is he trying to sow the seeds of a leadership spill, as the Australians would say in Labour? Is he saying, Labour, you've only got a chance with us, with me, if you dump Chippy?